Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something unexpectedly hairy. Literally. You've just woken up somewhere between the 17th and 18th century. The air's a little dry. And outside your window, street vendors in Istanbul are selling roasted chestnuts. And you, rather unfortunately, have a beard. Not the stylish kind. Not the cleanly sculpted, poetic hero kind. No, this one is thick, bold, and honestly, it looks like it holds political opinions. Naturally, your biggest concern isn't jet lag, or the language barrier, or even the fact that you just woke up in a bed made of wooden, vaguely itchy wool. Your real worry? Is this beard going to bankrupt you? Before we settle in, feel free to tap the like and subscribe buttons only if you feel cozy here, of course. And if you're up for it, let me know in the comments where you tuning in from. And what time is it right now? Alright, light slow, blanket on. Maybe a little white noise in the background, let's wander back through time together. You step outside, into a world of slow-minus moving carts and long robes. The men wear turbans, the women are veiled. You try to find a mirror, and after a few failed attempts, you catch your reflection in the curve of a brass kettle. And honestly, you don't look half bad. You've landed in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, probably during its golden age. You're not sure what day of the week it is, but you do know one thing. You really need to figure out what this beard means. As you walk down the bustling street, your senses are immediately hit by a mix of charcoal smoke, spices, and what you sincerely hope is just the smell of goats. Almost every adult male you pass has a beard. Some are wild and woolly, some are perfectly sculpted. Others look like they were designed by someone with a ruler and too much free time. You duck into a small street stall. The owner, busy reheating tea, gives you a look and says, "New face, nice beard. Paid your tax yet?" You blink. Was that a joke? His expression says otherwise. Beards, he explains, aren't free around here. At first, you assume HES hinting for a tip. But then he reaches under the counter and pulls out a carefully folded sheet of parchment. Stamped, signed, and very official minus looking. It's a beard registration certificate. It even includes a foreigner category neatly translated into both Arabic and Ottoman Turkish. According to him, there were times in the Ottoman Empire when people were actually taxed for their facial hair. Historians still argue over this. Some say it was a localized regulation. Others believe it was a deliberate aesthetic tax set by the Sultan himself to regulate appearances among nobles. You're still processing this revelation when he adds, "Also, if you haven't paid up, barbers won't touch you." That's when it hits you. Not shaving isn't just a hygiene issue here. It's not even about fashion. It's a political statement. Right now, your face isn't your own. It belongs quite possibly to the Ministry of Finance. You order a glass of mint tea and sit down, heart pounding with the ridiculous beauty of it all. You've time-minus traveled into a world where your facial hair has legal implications. And now you've got to make a choice. Will you hide your beard and hope no one notices? Or go register that fuzzy little tax liability and become an official citizen of the hairy republic? You wake up the next morning to the sound of metal scraping stone and what you think might be a goat sneezing. You're still in Ottoman Istanbul, still bearded, still annexed, and still incredibly confused. Today, you've decided to solve your hairy little problem the only way a rational 21st century time traveler would. You're going to the barber. Now, to be clear, the barber shop isn't a slick modern salon with espresso machines and overpriced hair wax. No, this one is tucked into a narrow alleyway, sandwiched between a spice merchant and someone selling what appears to be slightly used falcons. The sign outside is a wooden board with a rusted pair of scissors carved into it. Below that, a phrase in Ottoman Turkish you can barely make outy. Clean faces, clear consciences. You duck inside. It's cool and dim, the kind of quiet that makes your thoughts echo. There are a few old chairs, a basin of water, and a rack of straight razors that look more ceremonial than practical. The barber, a weary man with impossibly perfect sideburns, raises an eyebrow at you. You want shave? Yes? He says. You nod but quickly add, only if it's legal. He pauses, then smirks. Ah, tax question. You knew it. He gestures for you to sit. In this city, he says, as he starts sharpening a blade with slow, meditative strokes, a barber is not just a barber. We are surgeons, confessors, sometimes spies. That's comforting. Also, he continues, if we shave someone who hasn't paid the beard tax, we get fined. You glance at the razors again and suddenly feel less brave. He goes on. It's not always enforced, but yes, on who's in charge. But yes, sometimes the city sends tax collectors to inspect faces, like market inspectors for meat but for chins. You imagine a man with a checklist, inspecting jawlines in the marketplace. Why the tax, though? You ask. He shrugs. Some say it started with a sultan who thought too many scholars were pretending to be religious just to get tax breaks. Others say it was to discourage vanity. Me? I think someone just hated mustaches. You laugh, a little too loudly. Then he leans in conspiratorially. But you didn't hear this from me. There are ways around it. Now we're talking. He points to a small wooden token hanging on the wall. Some men pay once. Get that stamp token, and Ray Midas use it every year. Others join guilds. 1 guild receipt. And your beard is part of your trade. You stare. Like a carpenter's saw but for your face? Exactly. He pauses, then adds, some nobles just bribed the collector. You nod slowly, like someone pretending to understand crypto. So can I get a shave or not? You ask. He studies your face for a beat. You look like a traveler. No one will check you for a few days. But after that, he makes a slicing motion with his hand, thankfully not with the razor. You thank him and stand to leave. Wait, he says. He digs around behind the counter and pulls out a small cloth pouch. Inside is a token, wooden, worn, with a barely legible stamp on it. Borrow it, he says, but don't tell anyone where you got it. You leave the shop feeling oddly like a member of a secret society. A mildly itchy, bureaucratically endangered society. You walk through the streets with the token in your pocket, feeling slightly more official. There's something about carrying government minus issued with that makes you stand a little straighter. But you're still not exactly sure what you've gotten yourself into. You need more context. So you do what any reasonable newcomer to an imperial capital would do. You start eavesdropping. You sit down at a tea stall near the Grand Bazaar, the kind where everyone seems to talk just a little too loud and nothing is ever really private. A few older men are already deep into a game of backgammon, sipping dark, sludgy Turkish coffee and debating something with the kind of passion normally reserved for politics, soccer, or whether a cat should be allowed to sit on the table. Today's topic? Did you see Ismail yesterday? One man says, smacking his game piece with unnecessary flair. He trimmed his beard. It's practically his candle. The other snorts. He works for the court now. He probably got a letter from the palace saying less beard, more compliance. They all laugh. You lean in slightly, pretending to focus on your lukewarm tea. But your ears are wide open. Turns out, in the Ottoman Empire, your beard wasn't just a style choice. It was a status signal. Scholars kept them long and full. Merchants favored neatly groomed goatees. Soldiers often had thick, square minus cut facial hair like armor for the jaw. And religious leaders? The longer, the holier, at least in theory. If you walked into the wrong neighborhood with the wrong style of beard, people might not just assume your profession. They might also assume your beliefs, your loyalties, and, crucially, whether you paid your taxes. And yes, the wrong assumptions could get you into trouble. Young men these days, one of the tea drinkers grumbles, they grow a scholar's beard and think that makes them wise. When I was young, a beard meant something. Yeah, the other replies, it meant you could afford to grow one. You're starting to get it. The beard tax, strange as it sounds, was just about money, it was about control. If the government could tax your face, it could monitor your class, your faith, your job, your alignment with the empire's many tangled expectations. A young man joins the table, clearly the punchline of their earlier jokes. Look, one of the elders says, tugging on his beard, our new friend has a philosopher's beard, but he can't even spell philosophy. More laughter. The younger man rolls his eyes, then notices you. Hey, foreigner, he says in a surprisingly friendly tone. You're new here? You nod. He squints at you, your beard Scholar? Or just someone who missed a shave? You open your mouth, but he waves it off. Doesn't matter. People will assume what they want anyway. Just remember, every strand says something. You nod politely, but internally, you're screaming, how did my facial hair become a resume? Historians still debate how widely this system was enforced. Some argue that only a few provinces ever really applied the beard tax. Others believe it was more symbolic, a bureaucratic scarecrow to encourage orderly grooming. Either way, the effect was real. Your beard was a walking billboard. As the sun begins to dip behind the domes of the city, you leave the tea stall with one very clear takeaway. In this empire, if your face has opinions, it better have documentation too. By now, your beard has become your biggest liability, most fascinating cultural lesson, and, strangely, kind of a character in your own story. You can almost hear it whispering, don't forget to pay my taxes, pal. But today, you're after the big question. Who came up with this idea in the first place? And more importantly, why? You decide to ask someone who might actually know. House owner, bake coffee house owner. Maybe, or a traveling scholar. But instead, you find a barber's cousin who swears, after only 2 sips of pomegranate wine, that the whole thing started with a mirror. A mirror, you ask? Eyebrows raised. Yes, he insists, dramatically gesturing with a half-minus eaten date. One morning, the Sultan looked into the palace mirror, saw his reflection, and hated his own beard, said it made him look tired. That's it. That's the origin story. According to this guy, Sultan Mehmet Ivy was having a bad beard day and accidentally invented a tax. You laugh. He doesn't. You think it's funny, he says, leaning in. But never underestimate the power of royal vanity. In a place where your appearance is tied to your image, and your image is tied to your authority, a beard can be a threat. You blink. That actually makes sense. Some historians agree that the beard tax may have started as part of a broader effort to standardize appearance among court officials. Others believe it was linked to military campaigns. Money was needed, fast, and beards just happened to be taxable real estate. And then there's the fun theory. Some say it was a passive minus aggressive strike against the rising popularity of Persian minus style grooming. Apparently, the Persian Empire's beard styles were catching on in Ottoman cities, sleek, elegant, and a little bit rebellious. Some sultans weren't thrilled about that. They wanted you to look Ottoman, not exotic, the cousin adds, chewing loudly. So they made the Persian beard expensive. You stare at him. So facial fashion diplomacy? Exactly. You try to imagine this happening today. The government issuing a man-bun tax or charging extra for frosted tips. The absurdity somehow makes it more believable. Later that day, you find yourself outside a government office not because you're about to pay the tax, but because you want to see what real tax records look like. Through a dusty window, you spot a clerk hunched over parchment, scribbling with the energy of someone who's definitely not paid enough. Beside him, stacks of documents labeled in Ottoman Turkish. One, you're told, contains registrations of facial hair, lengths, styles, even occasional sketches. That's right. Sketches. Apparently, some inspectors culled and described beard types accurately enough, so they doodled them instead. Academic debates still swirl around one infamous marginalia, a curly-minus bearded man, next to a note that reads, "Suspicious. Maybe hiding coin pouch." Of course, historians still don't agree on how centralized this all was. Some claim the beard tax only applied to court officials. Others say it was a local policy enforced by overzealous governors. A few argue the entire thing is a historical game of telephone, where one law was exaggerated into legend. But standing here now, in this humming, sun-drenched city, beard token in your pocket and warm bread in your hand, you don't need academic consensus. You can feel it. Beards, work currency, politics, and yes, accidentally hilarious. And somewhere out there, a mirror is still laughing. You decide it's time to visit a mosque, not just for spiritual insight, but because someone at the coffee house whispered that beard politics get very real in religious spaces. You take off your shoes, step inside, and instantly feel the coolness of marble under your feet. The air is thick with incense and quiet murmurs. Golden calligraphy spirals up the domes. Light filters in through colored glass, and time slows down. Which is great, because you're going to need some time to process what happens next. You find a spot near a group of men sitting in a loose circle, discussing theology in tones that hover somewhere between peaceful and passive minus aggressive. One man is stroking his beard so thoughtfully, you wonder if he is communicating with it. Another spots you. You're new. He says, friendly but sharp. "Where's your teacher?" Observing, you offer. He nods, though you can tell that's not how this usually works. Then the topic shifts to beards. Again. Someone asks if trimming is acceptable. Another says trimming is necessary. A third jumps in with a quote from a hadith. You catch phrases like fit raw and obligation and must be at least a fist long, followed by someone muttering, "That's just a metaphor." You realize something? In this world, beard length is theological territory. Some argue that a proper beard is a divine commandment. Others say it's cultural. A few say it depends on your madhhab, your school of thought. One man references an imam who measured his beard daily to stay within righteous limits. There is no consensus which, to be honest, is kind of comforting. Makes you feel like you're back on the internet. One of them turns to you and says, "You are not from here." "Yes? What do scholars say where you come from?" You panic. The only scholars you know are on YouTube and occasionally mispronounce Ottoman. "I think," you say carefully, "people focus more on moisturizing." A long pause. Then, mercifully, laughter. But beneath the jokes, you start to see a deeper layer. Beards are not just religious symbols, they're religious battlegrounds. To shave or not to shave? To trim or let it grow? What's piety? What's fashion? What's political compliance? And more importantly, when does personal grooming become taxable? One of the younger men, clearly a student, leans over and whispers, "Some scholars believe beard taxes were used to blur the line between religious authority and state control. If the state can dictate religious appearance, it can slowly reshape faith itself." That's a heavy statement. You nod solemnly. Or at least you think it's solemn. You've never nodded in theological solidarity before. Then someone pulls out a parchmented diagram of famous Islamic scholars and their beards. It's like a visual taxonomy. Ibn Sina's thin and elegant, Al-Minus Gazel is long and flowing. Rum is looking suspiciously stylish. It's not about length. The student says, it's about intention. You decide not to mention that back home. You once shaved your beard into lightning bolts for Halloween. Probably woodland score theological points here. As you step out of the mosque, the late afternoon sun catches your reflection in a shop window. You see a face that doesn't quite know its place yet between faith and fashion, taxation and tradition. But it does know one thing for sure. Your beard is no longer just facial hair. It's a passport. Be debate. And in some cases a fine waiting to happen. You decide to take a long walk, hoping a change of scenery might give your brain a break. Instead, it gives you something even better. A walking museum of facial hair politics. The Grand Bazaar is chaos in the most beautiful way. Fabrics flutter like flags. Vendors shout offers that are half poetry, half pressure. Cats nap on piles of silk like they own stock in the empire. And then there are the beards. You start noticing the styles. There's the silver-minus bearded man by the spice guard, this beard neatly divided into two braided tails, like twin rivers of pepper-minus colored wisdom. HES giving serious retired admiral turned philosopher energy. Then there's the young scribe, fresh-minus-faced, but sporting an ambitious mustache, clearly trying to age himself into credibility. HES scribbling orders while occasionally adjusting his facial hair like it might slip out of place and reveal the child beneath. A merchant with a dramatically waxed goatee walks by holding a string of worried beads and a ledger. You get the impression his beard costs more to maintain than most horses. Then you're a somewhere between confused tourist and tax fraud suspect. You start to see the unspoken rules. Long and wild? Probably a scholar or Sufi mystic. Trimmed and pointed? Military, maybe mid-minus ranking. Stylized and symmetrical? Merchant? Probably wealthy. Sparse? Or absent? A young man, or a tax-minus dodger. Beards here are a resume. You pass a group of women, heavily veiled, their eyes flicking from your face to your clothes. One of them nudges another and whispers, something probably about your obvious just time-minus traveled in vibe. But the fact that they notice your beard, comment on it, react to it confirms the theory. Facial hair here speaks louder than words. And the government? It's listening? According to one spice vendor you chat with after buying some suspiciously discounted cinnamon, the beard tax was always monetary. In some cities, he says, they made you register your style. Every few years, a census of faces. You blink. A what? A beard census. Every man had to declare their beard style. Scholars say the records were used to track political leanings. A change in style could suggest a change in loyalty. That can't be real, you think, until he adds, there's a rumor a Pasha once faked a religious conversion by growing a scholar's beard. Just long enough to infiltrate a rival sect. You're not sure what's more shocking, the story or the fact that people here would totally believe it. You wander deeper into the market and find a booth selling beard oils. The vendor grins and says, made with olive oil, fig extract, and tax-minus deductible intentions. You're still not sure if that's a joke. There's even a stall selling beard combs, tiny, carved from bone or ivory with little inscriptions. One says, righteousness begins at the chin. By sunset, you've gathered to things. You've walked at least for miles in leather shoes not built for this. Beards here are not a joke. You sit on a low wall and look around, watching the silhouettes of bearded figures against the golden light of minarets. You realize this society doesn't just tolerate beards, it communicates with them. You've heard of body language. This is follicle language. And guess what? You're learning to read it. The next morning, you decide to try something daring. You walk down the main road with your beard uncovered. No scarf, no hood, no clever hat to obscure it. Just you, your face fuzz, and the open streets of Istanbul. Big mistake. It starts innocently enough, just some side-minus eyes from older gentlemen, and a disapproving glare from a woman selling flatbread. But then a man in uniform steps out from behind a stall. HES got a clipboard. Not a sword, not a spear, a clipboard. Somehow more threatening. Your beard, he says, pointing directly at your chin, as if you'd just drawn graffiti on a mosque. Documentation? You freeze. You pat your pockets. You pull out your beard token. The one the barber gave you. You hold it up like a backstage pass at a concert you weren't invited to. He squints, tilts his head. This token, he says slowly, is last year's model. I know so. He pulls out a parchment and starts scribbling. You try to peer at what HES writing, but he turns it away. Probably for dramatic effect. Then he hands it to you. A fine. For an authorized follicular display. You stare at it. It's real. It has ink and stamps and a place for your signature, which you fake with the confidence of a man who once signed a pizza receipt upside down. Report to the local registry. The officer says, and walks away like this happens to him at least 3 times a day. You slump onto a bench. Your beard droops in shame. And it hits you, you've just been fined for your face. Apparently. During certain periods of Ottoman history, especially in urban centers like Istanbul, beard-related enforcement was entirely mythical. While modern historians disagree on how widespread it really was, there are scattered reports of local ordinances requiring proof of professional affiliation for specific beard styles. In some guilds, a beard was literally your license to operate. And when you broke those rules, you didn't get arrested. You got papered. You head toward the registry office, a low stone building that smells like ink and dust and unreturned scrolls. Inside, you find a scribe who looks up warily and says, "Beard violation." You nod. He gestures toward a queue made up entirely of men with very guilty looking chins. Some are soldiers with stubble, perhaps to soon after a campaign. Others wear merchant robes but sport Sufi style facial hair. One guy has what you can only describe as an avant-guard beard, possibly illegal on artistic grounds. You finally reach the desk. The clerk looks at your token, sighs, and stamps it. You need to update your beard classification within 7 days. You blink. Beard classification? He pushes forward a scroll. It lists 15 categories from mature merchant crescent to theological standard length to retired but still wise. You're told to pick one. You do what any rational person would do. You close your eyes and point. You land on traveling scholar unconfirmed. He nods. Good choice. A lot of flexibility. People won't ask you many questions. Just carry this. He hands you a new token, slightly shinier. Stamped. Official. You walk out into the afternoon sun. Freshly registered. Officially drained. And existentially confused. You've just learned a hard lesson. In this city, facial expression matters, but facial hair costs extra. Your freshly minted beard token sits snug in your sash, like it belongs there. Like you belong here. Almost. But there's still something nagging at you. The feeling that people are still whispering about beards. Not in the usual, is it trimmed evenly? Something more. Underground. So you start asking around. Not directly, of course. You don't want to look like an arc in a fez. You hang around the barbershop again, strike up casual conversations at tea stalls. Even bribe a cat with dried fish for access to the alley behind a madrasa. And then, finally, someone takes the bait. A young man in an apron leans in close while pouring your tea and says, "If you want to shave, no taxes, no paperwork." You didn't hear it from me. You raise an eyebrow. Go on. That's how you end up being blindfolded with what smells like someone's old prayer cloth. Led down 3 alleyways, past a rug shop, to a curtained doorway, and into the most secretive barber shop you've ever seen. It's dim. There's a copper bowl steaming in the corner. The walls are covered in hanging plants and half-done portraits. And in the center sits a man with a beard so glorious it looks like a forest that's read philosophy. "You seek freedom?" he says, not looking up. You nod. He finally lifts his eyes and smiles. Then you seek the order of the hidden blade. You try not to laugh. You fail a little. "This is real?" you ask. He gestures around. You think this much peppermint oil appears by accident? Turns out, this is one of many underground shaving circles, an informal network of barbers who operate outside the official tax system. They serve travelers, rebels, and ordinary citizens who just want to keep their jawlines personal. Each chapter of the circle has its own code words. In some places, you order a cold tea if you want a clean shave. In others, it's double ink. No ledger if you want your beard reshaped without paperwork. You learn that some barbers keep 2 sets of razors, one for official use stamped in log and one hidden beneath the floorboards. The penalties for getting caught: fines, loss of license, public lectures by particularly boring tax officials. But they keep doing it. Why? Because for some, it's about freedom. For others, it's about protest. For most, it's just because the legal barbershops are booked out 2 weeks in advance. You sit down and ask for a simple trim. Documented, or the barber asks. You smile. "Invisible, please." He nods, dips the blade in warm water, and begins. There's something oddly peaceful about the moment. The scrape of steel, the scent of citrus oil, the fact that you're part of a completely unofficial, mildly rebellious, possibly illegal grooming ritual. As he works, he tells you stories. One about a tax inspector who shaved off his own beard in protest. Another about a guild master who trained his apprentices in secret, using goat fur and wooden mannequins. And then there's the rumor of a city where no one paid the beard tax for 5 years because they all agreed to wear fake mustaches over their actual beards. You chuckle. Did it work? He shrugs. Historians still argue about it. Of course they do. When HES finished, your face feels lighter, cooler, less economically controversial. He hands you a small piece of cloth embroidered with a crescent moon into single hair. "Show this to anyone in the circle," he says. "They'll know you're trusted." You tuck it into your sleeve and leave through the back door. In a city where taxes reach as far as your pores, you've just had an unaxed moment of peace. You walk down the alley, half-minus expecting someone to shout after you. But no one does. Your jawline is free. For now. You wake up the next morning to the sound of drums echoing through the street. Not festival drums. Not wedding drums. These are the kind of drums that say, something official and mildly annoying is happening. You stumble outside, face freshly shaved from last night's off-the book trim, and see a small procession of men in matching turbans and bureaucratic energy marching down the road. At the front is a man holding a large scroll. He unrolls it with dramatic flair and shouts, "By decree of the Divan, an increase in emergency levies shall now include facial classifications and registry updates. Effective immediately." You blink. You know the tone of voice. That's the we minus spent minus much minus a minus a minus a minus war tone. And sure enough, The man continues, all citizens with taxable facial distinctions shall report to their respective district registrar by week's end, or face fines and potential grooming suspensions. Grooming suspensions. You don't even know what that means, but it sounds like a very official way of saying, no barber for you. You sidle up to a local merchant, a portly man selling copper pots and what appear to be second-hand oil lamps. Emergency levies, you ask? He sighs. They say it's for the Navy, or the wall repairs, or the Sultan's third wedding this season. Who knows anymore? You raise an eyebrow. If they're taxing beards again? Not just beards, he says. Headscarves too. Turban fabric length. Even eyebrow grooming if you're in the capital. You blink. Eyebrow grooming is taxable? Only if it looks expensive. There it is again, the subtle absurdity of a system tried to control appearance as a stand in for identity. You've seen this before in whispers and gestures, but now it's on parade. You overhear a city official grumbling to a colleague it's the easiest kind of tax, really. Visible. Convenient. No need to open chests or weigh spice sacks. Just point and charge. And suddenly, it clicks. The beard tax wasn't just about aesthetics. It was about accessibility. Unlike land or livestock, a beard walks with you. It can't be hidden in a basement or disguised as a relative. It's a tax collector's dream, always visible, always growing, and very, very public. And when the empire needs money fast, what better way than to tax what people can't easily remove? Historians argue to this day whether the beard tax was a calculated financial strategy or a side-minus effect of a much larger identity crisis. Some say it was about enforcing cultural uniformity. Others think it was a soft way to spy on ideological trends. Read the beards, know the people. Whatever the reason, the effect was clear. Your face was no longer just yours. You spend the afternoon watching people line up outside the registrar's tent. Some look bored, others anxious. A few carry mirrors on beard combs, nervously touching up their tax, minus facing aside. You notice a pattern. The poor are mostly clean, minus shaven. The wealthy, gloriously bearded, stylized, curled at the ends, dusted with fragrant toil. Not because they wanted to pay more, but because they could. It was a quiet form of showing off. I can afford to be taxed for this. You realize this isn't just about money. It's about messaging. A well-maintained beard was a silent declaration of status. It said, I am visible. I am significant. I am profitable to the empire. And for the empire, that made you worth watching. You head home, your face suddenly feeling a little too public. The cool breeze brushing your jaw reminds you that every whisker you grow might just be someone else's business. And right now, that someone is holding a clipboard. You need answers, not dramatic T-stall stories. You want hard, dusty, parchment-based truth. So you head to the Imperial Archives. It's a building so old that the stone seems to be holding its breath. Vines crawl up the columns like they've got tenure, and every doorway looks like it leads into a time loop of bureaucratic despair. Perfect. Inside, the air smells like candle wax, leather bindings, and secrets. You whisper your request to the clerk. Historical tax documentation, specifically beard-related, and the man doesn't even flinch. Just nods and disappears into the shelves. That's how you know it's real. You're lead to a small reading room, where the clerk drops a bundle of scrolls onto the desk with a soft thump. Careful. One of them is from the re-ink period. Still smells like cinnamon. You blink. Cinnamon? He leans in. Long story. Don't like anything. Noted. You start unrolling documents. The handwriting is ornate and almost aggressively curly, like the ink itself had a mustache. And what you find is a glorious mess. Some decrees are clear: all merchants with beards exceeding 3-finger minus lengths must register. Others are more poetic: let no man's chin escape the eyes of state. There are tables, actual tables, categorizing beard types and their corresponding rates. Scholars: tapered flow, moderate tax, militant cut, low tax that requires state identification. Mystics: cascade, high tax with optional incense certification. One scroll even includes drawings, little ink portraits of different beard types with expressions that seem to say, yes, I am taxable, but I am worth it. And then, right in the middle of a fragile leather minus-bound ledger, you find the thing that breaks your brain. A government memo titled, Recommendations on Beard Class Surveillance Political Risk Assessment. You stare. This isn't just about money. This is facial profiling. According to this document, certain beard styles were considered signs of political alignment or religious extremism. Others were flagged as indicators of foreign influence, especially Persian grooming trends, which were viewed with deep suspicion. There are passages underlined in faded red ink. The scholar's beard, when paired with certain headgear, may indicate subversive leanings. The merchant's goatee, when waxed excessively, suggests potential bribery behaviors. You'll laugh quietly, nervously, because it's so absurd, and yet so specific. And this is where historians start to lose their minds. Some claim this is clear proof that the beard tax was a tool of political control, part of a larger apparatus of surveillance. Others argue it's merely a reflection of court paranoia, never widely enforced. A few believe the whole thing was satirical, like a bureaucratic inside joke that spiraled out of control. But sitting here, in this dusty room, one thing feels certain. The state didn't just want your money. It wanted your image. It wanted your face as a signal, a billboard, a fingerprint for public behavior. You roll up the scrolls slowly, careful not to break anything, including your remaining faith in governance. And as you walk out into the daylight, you touch your chin instinctively. Your beard isn't just hair, it's a flag. And sometimes, it's waving in a wind you didn't know existed. The sun is hot today. Unapologetically hot. The kind of heat that makes even the stone walls sweat, and definitely makes you regret any decision involving wool. But you're on a mission. You've been told that if you really want to understand the beard tax system, you need to see the differences, not just between individuals, but between classes. So you make your way to one of the richer neighborhoods, a district filled with domed villas, private gardens, and fountains that gurgle politely instead of splashing loudly like their downtown cousins. Everything here feels smug, and so do the beards. You pass noblemen lounging in shaded courtyards, sipping chilled sherbet and discussing things like land inheritance complications and the scandal of last month's calligraphy contest. Their beards are immaculate, carefully shaped, luxuriously oiled, and let's be honest, probably more groomed than your actual resume. One man even has beard jewelry. Tiny golden rings woven into a braided goatee. It's somewhere between breathtaking and aggressively unnecessary. And this is when it hits you. This tax was the same for everyone. You see, when nobles paid the beard tax, it was a punishment. It was a performance, a show of status. A luxury tax, really. Their faces said, I am so successful, I can afford to pay for my aesthetic choices. My beard is not a necessity. It's an asset. Meanwhile, across the river, you later visit a working class neighborhood. Here, the story is different. You find men with patchy beards, tired eyes, and the kind of stubble that says, I have 5 children and no time for politics. One baker tells you, I shaved mine off last year. couldn't afford the fee. People started calling me boy, a child minus face. You wince. Another man, a shoemaker, abs. I tried to keep a short beard, just enough to stay respectable, but the tax collector said it still counted as taxable. Barely 2 fingers long. You ask him how he responded. He shrugs. I paid. What else can you do? Can't argue with a man holding a scroll at a wax stamp. Here, a beard isn't a statement, it's a burden. A negotiation between dignity and cost. Historians often overlook these distinctions. Records, after all, tend to be written by the people with the golden beard rings. But oral stories? They tell a different tale. You hear about a man who shaved every other week to avoid the tax but still look respectable enough at prayers. Another who tried to grow a mustache, minus only style, thinking it would bypass the rules. It did not. Then there's the story of the twin brothers, one a merchant, one a laborer. The merchant grew a beard to attract business. The laborer shaved his to avoid the fee. Eventually, people stopped believing they were related. You laugh when you hear that story, but deep down it's taints. Because you realize, this tax didn't just touch your wallet. It touched your identity. It decided who got to look respectable, who got to look holy, and who just had to settle for economically practical. You walk home slowly, reflecting on everything you've seen. The contrast is sharp. 2 men, 2 beards, 2 versions of truth. And your face, somewhere in between. It's twilight now, and you've wandered into one of those corners of the city that doesn't quite exist on any map, part market, part garden, part literary salon with questionable plumbing. Here, under the soft glow of oil lamps and surrounded by the scent of jasmine and dink, you stumble into something unexpected. A poetry gathering, not a formal one. More like a bunch of clever, over-minded caffeinated writers who called into for real rebellion. So they sharpened their wit instead. You sit in the back, sipping something that tastes like spiced regret, and listen. The first poem is about a man whose beard grows so long it gets its own passport. The second, I mock epic titled Ode to the Lost Mustache of Mehmed the Half Minus Bold. And then, one that gets the loudest laugh is about a woman who glues goat hair to her chin and walks into the tax office to claim her rights as a legal beard minus bearer. People love that one. You laugh too, maybe a little too loudly, and someone beside you says it's based on a real event you know. You blink. Seriously? She nods. Well, mostly. There was a period where women in some districts started protesting the beard tax by putting on fake facial hair and showing up at tax offices, demanding registration. You imagine the scene. A line of determined women with glued minus on chin fuzz, staring down an army of confused clerks. Did it work? You ask. The woman shrugs. No, but it was hilarious. And it made the tax collectors really uncomfortable. You learn that these acts weren't just pranks. They were a subtle form of protest and artistic rebellion against the empire's absurd obsession with categorizing everything. Even follicles. Historians have found satirical pamphlets from the era, some in rhyme, some in pointed prose. One of the most famous was a mock tax proposal for eyelashes, claiming they contribute to societal distraction and should be fiscally managed. Another suggested taxing nostrils by width, under the argument that larger nostrils consume more public air. There's even a surviving court record of a poet fined for excessive facial imagery in public verse. His crime? A poem that described the Sultan's beard as a haste awaiting enlightenment. You're told that a secret tradition formed during this time. The beard ballads, poems and songs passed in secret, mocking the tax, the registrars, even the entire idea of appearance minus based regulation. In one, a man pretends to be 2 different people by shaving half his face and walking backward in mirrors. In another, A fake edict is read aloud declaring that all Qin-based assets are now imperial property. And somewhere in the corner of this gathering, someone's performing a puppet show where one marionette shaves another mid-axe Ottoman gets arrested for follicular subversion. It's delightful, ridiculous, and deeply clever, because beneath the jokes is a truth you've been circling for days. When power reaches into your reflection, laughter becomes resistance. You leave the gathering with your brain spinning, your heart lighter, and a slightly illegal pamphlet tucked into your sleeve. Its title? To Beard or Not to Beard Day Tragedy in 5 tax brackets. You walk through the lamp-lit streets, past balconies strung with laundry and shadows that look suspiciously like poets in hiding. Tonight, you realize something important. A beard can be many things. A symbol, a burden, a joke, and sometimes, a punchline that punches back. The next morning, you wake up to drums again, but this time, they're less official tax decree and more summons trying to start a movement. You follow the sound down to the square and find a crowd gathering. At the center, a man stands on a crate, holding up what looks suspiciously like a homemade sign. In big, sweeping calligraphy it reads, Who minus free day. Let the chins breathe. You rub your eyes. This is a protest. Sort of. The speaker is passionately declaring today to be the first ever Who minus free day, a citywide moment of defiance, where men refuse to pay beard taxes, shave creatively, and reclaim the follicular freedom of their forefathers. You expect guards to show up immediately, but surprisingly, no one's stopping them. Probably because everyone is too curious. Around you, people are pulling scarves off their faces, laughing, twirling their mustaches into shapes they definitely didn't pay to register. One guy has shaved his spiral into his chin and keeps saying, it's a statement piece. Even the local baker, who, up to now, seemed allergic to controversy, is proudly displaying a bread roll shaped like a handlebar mustache. And you? You're just watching. Because deep down, you're skeptical. You've spent days navigating this tax. You've seen the archives, the politics, the punishments. You've met underground barbers and nervous merchants. This isn't something that changes with a poster and a good chant. Still, it's nice to see hope shaped like facial hair. Someone starts passing out pamphlets. Let it grow, a manifesto for the modern jawline. Another reads, Beard rights are human rights. You open one to find a poem that simply says, We are not goats. We are men. Stop charging us for our beards again and again. Catchy. Then the speaker announces something dramatic tonight. We march, uncertified and untrained. The crowd cheers. You blink slowly. That's when an older man near you mutters, This won't last. Same thing happened 10 years ago. You turn. There was another beard protest? He nods. Oh yes. Called it the Great Shave -in. Everyone gathered, shaved in unison, declared taxation tyranny. Next day, barber prices doubled. Beard tax returned a month later with interest. You stare. So it failed? He shrugs. Not entirely. People remembered it. And that scared the right people. That's the thing about symbolic protest. It doesn't always win. But it marks. It plants an idea in the collective memory like a stubborn weed in bureaucratic concrete. Historians still debate whether these movements ever had real impact. Some say they were performative, fueled by poetry and pomegranate wine. Others believe they laid the groundwork for broader civic resistance, proof that even small things like beards could spark bigger questions about control. You linger until dusk. The protest fizzles not with a bang, but with a yawn. People drift away, chuckling. No one's arrested. No declarations are signed. But the whispers remain. As you walk home, You glance at your reflection in a puddle. The water ripples. Your beard looks slightly rebellious today, and somehow, that feels like enough. A week passes, and just like that it's over. You hear the news from a limping fishmonger who tells you between wheezes. The beard tax. It's gone. You don't believe him at first. You think he means his tax is gone, or his beard. Or perhaps HES just developed a philosophical stance on shin freedom. But then it spreads. Word ripples through tea shops, Bathuses, even the bureaucratic corridors where words usually go to die. The tax has been suspended, cancelled, nullified. Official reason? Administrative restructuring. Unofficial reason? Public pressure. Protests. Maybe even that guy with the spiral chin finally got through to someone. Whatever the cause, it's real. And by midday, the barber shops are weirdly quiet. You wander past one, normally bustling with men anxious to avoid fines or to get their regulation minus compliant shape minus up and instead find the barber just sitting. HES whittling a stick. Casually, as if his hands haven't given shape to 40,000 taxable jawlines. You step inside. He looks up. Back already? He says, "Made a rebellious fade?" You grin. "I heard the tax is gone." He nods slowly. "Yes, and with it half my business." You pause. "Wait, aren't you happy?" He leans forward, resting his elbows on the counter. "Let me tell you something. When the tax came in, it was annoying. It made me a paper minus pusher, a snitch with scissors. But it also made my chair important. Every shave was an act of negotiation. Every trim had politics." He looks out the window. Now, it's just hair again. You sit down in the chair. He doesn't ask what style you want. He just starts trimming. Outside, the city is adjusting. For the first time in years, people are walking freely, some bearded, some not. And no one is counting centimeters. No one's being measured, inspected, labeled. And the strangest thing? It's a little boring. The merchant who used to signal his wealth with golden beard rings, now he just ties his goatee with string. The scholar who once used his beard to assert spiritual depth, clean minus shaven, claims he needs a reset. And those old poetic protesters? They're moving on to other topics. There's talk of a new satirical piece. "Tax Me Not, O Bushy Brow," a treatise on eyebrow equality. You laugh. Of course. But for the barbers, the poets, the street philosophers, something feels different now. Lighter, maybe, or emptier. Without the tax, there's no need for secret tokens. No more underground razors. No more suspicious scroll inspections or surprise fines for expressive follicles. No more drama either. You realize as the barber finishes that this strange, bureaucratic rule had become something more than a nuisance. It was a shared ritual, a weird, hilarious, sometimes frustrating dance between citizen and state. Now it's gone, and while no one really misses paying the fee, some do miss the story. You leave the shop. The sun's dipping low. The air smells like lentils and change. Your beard, it's now completely legal. And, weirdly enough, kind of lonely. You're standing in front of a mirror again. Not a copper kettle this time. Not a shop window or a puddle in the street, an actual mirror. Glass, framed in carved walnut, hanging a little crooked in the rented room you've somehow made home during your accidental Ottoman residency. And for the first time in days, you really look at yourself. The beard is still there, trimmed, dignified, regulation minus free. It's no longer a source of financial anxiety or identity confusion. It's just part of you now. But your relationship with it? Completely changed. You think back to that first morning. How strange it was to find facial hair on a borrowed face. How you stumbled into a world where beards weren't just personal but public, measured, monetized. You remember the barbers, the official ones with paperwork, and the underground ones with soft hands and sharper secrets. You remember the registry office, with its scrolls and absurd classifications, the protesters, the poetry, the historians who still cowled and agree whether any of this ever happened exactly this way. And somewhere between all those moments, your beard stopped being just a weird historical footnote, became a symbol of something far more complex. Visibility. You were seen by guards, by clerks, by strangers. Your face told a story whether you wanted it to or not. You learned that in some eras, even the way your whiskers curl can be a political decision. You learned that taxation isn't always about gold or grain. Sometimes, it's about identity. And who gets to own it. And now you're free. No fee, no scroll, no barber with the right to snitch. You run a hand along your jawline. It's strange how something so small, a few thousand hair follicles, could carry the weight of class, religion, protest, and policy. You sit by the window and watch the city winding down. A man with a scholarly beard walks past a soldier with none at all. They nod at each other. No inspection. No paperwork. Just two humans with faces of their choosing. You smile. Then you spot a young boy, maybe 12, holding up a fake mustache on a stick. He is laughing with his friends, pretending to be a judge or a poet. They take turns swapping the mustache, playing out exaggerated scenes of tax day in squeaky voices. They don't fear the old beard tax. They play with it, and that, you realize, is how absurdity becomes history. Tomorrow, you might wake up back in your own time. No more registrars. No more guild tokens. No more suspicious glances for your unclassified chin. But tonight you sit by this crooked mirror, watching the city exhale. And somewhere deep down, you feel a little more connected to the soft, ridiculous, beautiful complexity of the past.